What is up, Coffee and Grit? Oh my God, you're probably noticing a huge difference. First off, you're not just opening up to awkward conversation to begin. We have a really cool, kick-ass song to start off with, and super excited. The big news is I've transferred over Coffee and Grit over to Speakeasy Broadcast Studios downtown Brighton, and this is just a top-class setup. I'm telling you what, already my guests are already talking about. They've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while, and instead of having to do all the work, and believe me, I can tell you and attest to this, there's so much work putting into doing a podcast. Just coming here, having Grant in the studio, setting us up with the cameras, having this first-class sound. I'm so excited to be here. So you'll see a huge change with Coffee and Grit and see it go up to the next level. And thank you for tuning in. Looking forward to getting even bigger and having new people listening to us. Oh, and I'm so excited for this. First off, it's my birthday episode. Second off, I have an amazing couple people in the studio today. I was really grateful to meet Meg at a networking meeting way back. I think it was in November towards the end of the year. And quite honestly, it was pretty brutal. They gave everybody permission to go through and give 1 minute introductions to who they are, and some people were taking like 16 minutes, and it was so super brutal. And then Meg stood up and told this really quick, incredible story about how she started her business and started her business by meeting a patient and realizing that this person needed something that was above and beyond what that traditional medical care that she was getting was, and started her whole entire business based around this. And I heard her tell this really cool, just real authentic story, and it stood out amongst the crowd. I knew I needed to meet her and know more about the story. Now, what's incredible is I did not know what I was in store for. I got a chance, and she told me I needed to come in and meet Shirley, and we were going to sit down and record a video and tell their story. And I didn't bring enough Kleenex. It was just a phenomenal story. I think we recorded for almost 3 hours that day, and I've since been entrenched. I've heard their story several times. I've literally edited and recorded so much video and listened to it, but I cry and get emotional every time. And then what's really cool is Meg sent me some notes. So Meg Scaling is CEO and founder of Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center out of Ann Arbor, and Shirley Ross was her patient that, you know, they met and combined, and I'm going to have them tell their story, but it's a beautiful story that is going to be in a book, in a movie. You're going to hear it here first. So I'm really honored to be able to bring them to Coffee and Grit and hear this story. But it's a really inspirational story of a patient and a young therapist that met and had no idea what kind of journey they were going to go on. It was going to be make miracles happen, move mountains, and most importantly, combine to create a business that's leaving a legacy and impacting lives of other people with brain traumas and brain issues. So Meg, Shirley, thank you so much for coming all the way out to Brighton. I'm so excited for you to no longer be Ann Arbor's best kept secret. So welcome.
Thank you for having us, and what a beautiful introduction.
Thank you.
To a very beautiful story.
Very beautiful story. And so, you know, let's just start off at the beginning. So first off, I'm going to have you both introduce yourselves. So Meg, just tell our audience a little bit more than outside of what I told about you. Who are you and how did you get started?
Sure. I am Meg Scaling. I am an occupational therapist, and I own Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center. I started off just like every other young therapist, trying to work 3 jobs and pay off my wedding, and I felt like the world was my oyster. I was going to do anything and everything, and passionately actually pursued pediatrics and took a lot of classes on sensory integration and neural development. And when I met Shirley, I was working at my second job and had a lot of experience in inpatient and acute care, but she was going to teach me a lot more about brain injury.
That's amazing. So Shirley, tell me a little bit about yourself. What was your origin before you met Meg? You know, who are you?
Who am I? I went to Central Michigan University and graduated from there. And from that job, I started working at the Adrian Training School for delinquent youth. And so I worked there for 25 years. And one day there was a riot broke out, and I tried helping the person I thought was starting it. And we started down the hall, and I got pushed back and forth into cement blocks and into a door frame. And so I got the girl where she needed to be, went back to the cafeteria to start cleaning up the broken dishes and tomato soup. And then I went unconscious. So I had CPR, which looking back now, I kind of liked CPR.
She's a jokester.
So that's basically about my jobs.
Yeah.
I also have 2 daughters and 3 grandkids.
At CMU, you didn't you star in some sports as well, or you play sports at CMU also?
I love sports. My degree was phys ed, and in college I played basketball, tennis, some volleyball, and some field hockey. So I'm very competitive.
Very athletic and very competitive.
Which is a huge, I'm sure as we get into this, I know, this is some incredible stuff. So I'm on the edge of my seat, like just this, constantly in the audience here. So I'm like, and then tell them about this, and tell them about this. So Shirley, how long had you had your injury before you had met Meg?
I had it 9 years, and I have no idea how I got into the therapies I got into because somebody took care of that for me. But I basically did machines, like any therapy you would think of, but nothing to do with a brain injury. And so I never really started on getting my brain better until I met Meg.
This is 9 years.
This is 9 years after. And when I was told I had a traumatic brain injury, I had no idea what it even was. So, yeah, I was basically living in the dark.
Yeah. So Meg, tell me, you said you were in your second job you met Shirley one day. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I was about 25 years old, and I walked in, and I was actually there to make a hand splint for someone else. And I noticed Shirley. I noticed this deer in the headlights look. I noticed the anxiety, some balance issues. You could just tell she wasn't comfortable in her own skin. And I asked about her. I said, tell me her story. She looks like she could use some help. And as an occupational therapist, half of my schooling is in physical disability education, and half of my schooling is in psychosocial rehab. So I had done an internship at a state mental hospital where I got to really work a lot on the mental health side of things. And I noticed PTSD signs, anxiety, panic, and I thought I might be able to help. So I asked for an evaluation.
Something I didn't know about your story, and this is what's really cool as I keep unpacking, is I was reading your notes. What inspired you to go into therapy in the first place?
Yeah, my dad is an occupational therapist. And I remember as a young 5 or 6 year old going to work with him one day. And he was working with someone with a very severe brain injury, someone who drooled constantly, always wore a bib, had no language except for maybe vocalizations that sounded kind of like yelling. And my dad was working with him, and they were laughing so hard that they both ended up crying. And I remember thinking, that is beautiful. Like someone in that chair who has the physical disability that he has, my dad was able to bring joy to him and laugh. And I just knew I either wanted to be an OT like my dad, or I wanted to be an art teacher because I'm really creative and I love using my brain that way too. And so that was my first inkling into OT.
So what's really cool about this, if any of my listeners know that I believe that we have a purpose. We're here for a reason. And a lot of times when we're younger, we have this idea of what we want to be. I knew that when I was younger in high school, I wanted to either be a psychologist or a therapist because I wanted to help other messed up people like me, or I wanted to be a sports journalist. And as I look at now, I didn't do any of those traditional routes. And I'm literally, a big capacity of my coaching is being a therapist and working with people through their mental challenges. And then I create all this content, and it ties into that journalist piece. And so when I read that about you and heard that piece about your dad and watching that happen, I was like, of course, that makes so much sense of why this whole thing happened in the first place, is seeing that guy laugh and seeing your dad and him laugh back and forth and how much joy he brought, how much that had to be impressionable on you.
It was. And it's interesting that you bring that story up because Shirley and I have talked so much about how laughter has been such a key piece to every single one of our therapy sessions. We can't take ourselves too serious. I mean, when you're working on, okay, let's try and get through this automatic door without a panic attack, you can't help but laugh at yourself a little bit because it sounds silly sometimes. Or let's put an apple in a cart and then let's leave the cart. And that's our goal, like baby step, baby goals. You have to laugh because, she was running the show. She was the woman in charge at the training school. She was the one running the ropes courses for these kids. She was someone that took them to Red Wings games and organized dances. And now our goal is to put an apple in a cart. And so you have to not take yourself too serious and you have to laugh with each other. And so I'm glad you brought that up because laughter, positive psychology is so important and laughter has been huge. I think we joke so many times about the things we were going to bring up on the show on the way here that we really aren't, but that was a good way to get us to laugh.
Well, and again, when I listened to the story for the first time, as we sat there was all the parts where there was crying, but then there was the natural, like Shirley would make a joke and it was just super funny. So it's that mixture of amazing emotions. So that's a perfect segue. Shirley, I know you've talked about as far as lifting and, and doing some of the physical things from the other therapists, but what else made Meg different than anybody you had experienced through that 9 years that you were working with?
Well, I think first of all, she was more like a friend, actually. Like, she knew me. She knew how to get me moving. We did sports. We did things that she knew that I would like, and some of that was to be able to do things I already knew and to just bring things back. And at the end of the day, we always talked about how did I succeed that day. And so the next time I would meet her, most of the time I'd forget what we did, but we would go back over it. And so I would still know the progress I was making every time I saw her.
And I would add, too, that some of the differences is that I recognized very early when I met her, I'll go into when I evaluated her. I had an orthopedic eval. I was at an orthopedic clinic. I was there. She did have left arm weakness, left leg weakness, some visual tracking issues, some balance issues. Certainly there were the fair share of things that I could address on an orthopedic eval. But I recognized really quickly that there was a lot of pain. There was a lack of joy and almost a lack of desire to keep moving forward if that was going to be all that life was. And so I flipped that orthopedic eval over to the blank side of the back side of that paper and did something called the PEO model, person, environment, occupation. And I drew 3 circles. And I said, Shirley, tell me about the person that you were and tell me about the person that you are. And tell me about the occupations that you had and the roles you had in life. And tell me about the roles you have now and the occupations you have now. And then I said, tell me about the environments that you went in and the environments that you lived in and you loved to be in before, and tell me about the environments you're in now. And it was very clear to me that this woman didn't leave her house for 9 years. She kept her blinds drawn. It was dark. She had so much sensory overload. She kept the lights and the sounds out. She tuned out people in her life. She tuned out friendships. Her cognitive issues were so severe that it made it hard for her to do the simple things in life, like go to the bank, go to the grocery store, go to a sporting event. This woman who loves sports couldn't go to a sporting event because she might not remember where she parked or how to get there or how to find her car or how to deal with the noises and the sounds and the sirens and the horns. So I saw someone who was such a special person that had no joy. And I might have been the first therapist to say, what brings you joy? Shirley, what did you say?
Nothing. Number one, I didn't even know what that meant. I was definitely just broken. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what made me happy, what made me sad. I was just in a total dark place.
I know how hard this is for you to talk about because of all the progress you've made and how you see yourself now. I know how hard that is to dive in and talk about. For our audience, can you dive in a little bit and talk about what is sensory overload and paint that picture of how that was impacting your life?
It could be anything. It could be somebody walking behind me, somebody coming too fast toward me, if people scared me, if the lights were too bright, if lights were blinking, noises in general. Just, I would try to zone out, and most of that 9 years I was zoned until I met Meg, and then she wouldn't let me zone anymore.
Well, and I'll say that it was a little bit of a covert operation because we haven't talked about how I got to do this fun thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that's part of the story.
This is a huge part of the story.
This is a huge part of the story. We've failed to tell you that we didn't do this in a clinic setting.
No.
Maybe you figured that out by now.
Because what happened?
So I recognized early that part of that PEO evaluation was that she shopped at a gas station, and a gas station only, and that she bought peanut butter, pretzels, and a cappuccino. And she didn't know how to pay with money. She didn't know if something was $3.50, that it could be rounded up to $4, or that she could pay with a $5. She just knew that peanut butter, cappuccino, and pretzels, she could pay with a $20, and she always got change back. So when I met her, she had a purse full of change and 20s. She had over $400 in change. Shirley, what would happen when you ran out of 20s?
I would go to the bank and take money out of the bank in 20s.
And you'd take all your change back and just say, you'd give them all the change and say, deposit this, and I need more 20s. Mm-hmm. So I recognized that she needed to be in an environment that challenged her. We needed to get out of the walls of a clinic setting. We needed to get into a grocery store. And so I did ask at that clinic if I could take her in my car to a tiny market, because I knew that going into a strip mall grocery store was going to be too much for her. I needed to find the smallest market. And at the time, there was a little market in Ann Arbor called Coleman's. And it's not there anymore, but it was a great little market. And we would practice, and I asked if I could take her there. And they basically said no. We don't have liability insurance for you to take her in the car. And so I just couldn't take no for an answer. I knew that her life depended on it. And, you know, we had some pretty intense conversations about her joy and her lack of joy. And I knew that finding something that was life worth meaning and in teaching her that she could do things, she just wasn't trying the right way and with the right people. And so I got my own liability insurance. I called the head of the American Occupational Therapy Association and spoke to the ethics committee and said, if I get my own insurance, if I don't charge for it, I'm not stealing their client. I'll do it on my own time. Can we go and do this meaningful therapy that I know she needs? And they said yes. So that is why we call it a covert operation, because we would sneak after the clinic therapy, we'd kind of sneak in my car, and then we'd go do the real therapy. And then eventually got a different job working 4 10-hour days. So I had Tuesdays off. So then every Tuesday we would meet, and we met for a few months until I got a phone call from her physician one night.
So, okay. You've been seeing Dr. Perlman was your doctor, right? And
Yes.
how long had you been seeing him up to this point?
I think I started out with him.
Okay.
Right?
So for the full nine-year period.
Yes, pretty much.
And you start working with Meg. So how much progress did you make in that 9-year period?
Next to nothing.
Oh, I don't know. You were in a coma, and you had to learn to walk, and you had to learn to talk, and you had to learn your ABCs. So you did make progress, but you weren't living a life worth living.
Right.
Your best life, right?
Yeah. I was getting stronger, but I wasn't getting any smarter.
So what happened when you walked in after working with Meg and coming in and seeing Dr. Perlman for your quarterly visit? What did he say?
He couldn't believe how much better I was. And so I think, didn't he get a hold, or Jan get a hold of him, or?
Yeah, he asked you. He said, "What? You're better."
Oh, yeah. And I
What-
told him I was
what's
working
different?
with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told him I was working with you and told him some of the things we were working on and that I felt like I was getting better.
And he's probably like, "Well, who's prescribing this? Because I'm supposed to be in charge here." And I have to say, Dr. Perlman is probably one of my favorite humans. And I'm going to look right in the camera because Dr. Perlman, you are a special, special man. And not many physicians take the time to ask those questions and notice a light in her, because he still went through his questions. You know, he has a list of questions that all physicians ask in the order that they ask them, but he noticed a different light in her. And most physicians don't take time to do that, but he did, and it changed my history and it changed your history.
I think it's important to highlight that, and I love how you gave Dr. Perlman that shout out, because it does take, for what to happen between you two, it takes that village. And I know there is another person that we're going to talk about in a little bit in Jan, that it was that village of components that had to come together in the perfect storm to create what happened created. Because if Dr. Perlman never reaches out to you, right, is this possible? Sustainable? Over the course of time that you guys did this, is this sustainable?
I would just probably still be working for free and Galaxy wouldn't be here. I mean, everything happens for a reason, and we're like a part of a woven tapestry. I feel like in the moment you only see what's in front of you. But when you pull back and see all the things that happened and the number of people that have been affected by that phone call, that he made to me at 10 o'clock at night, asking me, Meg, I understand you're seeing Shirley Ross. And I thought, oh no. And I said, am I in trouble? And he said, no. He said, I've been her doctor for 9 years. What are you doing? She's getting better. And there's no reason you shouldn't be getting paid for this. And that's where Jan Hansen comes in. Jan Hansen was Shirley's psychologist and neuropsychologist. And he said, I've already talked to Jan Hansen. She's going to teach you how to do the billing. And congratulations, you have your first private practice patient.
And so began your business.
And so began.
Wow. But again, going back, the reason why this story is so beautiful is because it takes, how many people have passed Shirley up into that 9-year period, not truly listening, truly diving in, like you said, asking about hope and joy. And then even Dr. Perlman, from a doctor's standpoint, to realize, oh my goodness, something is different. Something is changing. And then not to be like, I'm the doctor here. There should be no treatment unless because there's so many people that would go to ego on that, right? And shut that down. But Dr. Perlman was like, no, not only do I want you to keep seeing Shirley, but I want you to go see more people, because more people need to be impacted by you.
Yeah. He would send me, I was like his little secret back then. So he would send me other clients that had a lot of complex comorbidities. So they might have had physical issues, cognitive issues, psychological issues, anxiety, PTSD. And he knew that I will tell you, I did not have all the answers. I have learned everything there is to learn about brain injury from working with Shirley and others that have put their trust in me, and we've figured it out together. But I think I'm going to get a shout out to my nanny who passed away yesterday.
Oh, no.
She did. But one thing that she taught me is to love the person in front of you. And it didn't matter who it was. She loved the people at the post office, the people at the dentist, the people at the ShopRite. Like, she loved who was in front of her. And I think that might be the difference, is when I saw Shirley, I cared about her.
Yeah.
And I think when you care about the people in front of you, you do what it takes to make sure that you help them move forward. And I guess that's where I'll plug Galaxy's values right now, because it makes sense to do that. Galaxy's values and my value as a therapist is, number one, build trusting relationships. And so you have to build that trust. And for Shirley and I, that meant I had to make sure that the challenges that I gave her were the just right challenge. It was just enough to challenge her, but also for her to feel competent and confident and like she had made a baby step. That was a huge game for us. The second value in Galaxy is to empower positive change, because that positive change has to come from within the person. So whatever that and you have to empower them. You can't just make the change for them or suggest goals for them. It has to be intrinsically motivated. And then the third thing is move forward and give back, because so many of the clients out there and people like Shirley was a give backer. That's not really a word, but that you wanted to give back to the kids. You love to invest in the kids. You love to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And for 9 years, you only worked on yourself.
Right.
And so the fact that we were working on goals that allowed you to get back into the community and things that were giving back made therapy more meaningful as well.
It's beautiful. So, all right, now you're getting paid. now you're getting paid. What happens next?
So I started getting paid. I started quitting my 3 jobs, took it down to a couple part-time jobs. I picked up a couple private practice patients. And then in 2007, I started an LLC because I wanted to expand my family. I forgot to mention, I have 3 beautiful kids and a lovely husband. Chad Scaling is my husband. And I have a 19-year-old Anna Scaling, a 17-year-old Sarah, and a 12-year-old Clayton. And so I wanted to have a family, and I had a wait list. So I never had a business card. I just had a wait list. And so I hired my first OT to help me. And for quite a few years, we worked out of a room smaller than this studio. And the community was our place of business. And so we would see clients like Shirley who needed to get back out into the community, and they might need to learn how to organize their house. If their brain is messy, their house can't be that messy too. Organize things so they could function in their home, and then help them function outside of their home and get back to stores and use a bus system. And so really helping people get into the community. And we did that for a long time until once again, I got fed up with working with therapists in other disciplines such as speech and PT that weren't thinking like me. So I felt like, gosh, why can't more people think the way I think? And so I decided in 2017 to open Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center and hire PTs and speech therapists. And now we have actually mental health as well that kind of think the way we do, outside the box and meeting that person in front of them.
Yeah. So you bring it all into one home under the same culture, the same umbrella.
Yeah. It's a family.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because when I was having therapy, I went to 3 different places. I would have therapy, drive to another one, and I didn't know that I could have one therapy right after another. I just took whatever slot they gave me, and so I would sleep in my car until it was time for my next one. And being able to do it all in one building is huge.
That's so huge. So tell me about what was next in your 2 journey, because I know it really shaped what you're talking about, what's going on at Galaxy and having your book full. And you talked about learning together.
Well, Shirley really was making incredible progress. And she made so much progress, she was kind of dangerous. So, when I was working with Shirley, her functional memory was not that great. So her courage was better, and she's always had this insane competitive spirit. So she was not going to take no for an answer. So if we had a goal, she was going to get that goal met. But she started to want to do it on her own. And I love that about you. But tell me some of the hiccups along the road.
Oh my gosh, there were so many.
Just pick a couple.
Well, one, I had to pass a driving test after I'd had my injury. And so when the guy came, he said, okay, just let's go for a ride around some of these streets. So I took him exactly where I knew I could go, and I knew how to get home.
What did driving mean to you at that time?
Driving was my escape. If I didn't drive, I was totally stuck at home, and I wouldn't be able to have therapy. And I had 2 girls.
Yeah.
Still raising 2 girls. So I needed my car.
You're a much better driver after she saw me, though, because she actually Probably shouldn't have been on the road back
I
then.
probably shouldn't have, but I was always careful. But that was very important.
What was the term that you were living by at that point in time?
Fake it till you make it.
She did. She actually couldn't visually track well, and she couldn't turn her head without getting something called, she had benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, which would cause nystagmus. And it was something that I discovered, and it is treatable. So she could have been treated 9 years earlier, but she didn't want to tell anyone she was having these issues because she was afraid she would get her license taken away. So when we discovered it, and I said, I think I can treat this, it was like, that could have happened 9 years ago.
That makes things so much easier
Right.
when I can see.
But it's amazing what masking your deficits. You have to feel safe with someone, and you were in survival mode.
I was.
Think about the hiccups of trying to drive to Ann Arbor and you end up in Flint, Michigan.
Yep, that happened.
That happened. Yep. You would go and get a whole cart of things, and then what would happen?
I would just leave it. I would leave the cart. And then when I got home, part of my brain thought I already had the stuff. And then come to find out I had nothing. And so I spent all that time, all that stress, filling my cart and left with nothing.
So she was starting to do this, and she, like when she's with me, everything was a just right challenge, and we were building on successes. And then she would, on her own time, decide, I'm gonna do this. And I loved her tenacity, but then she'd feel really defeated because it was, it's not safe. It's not safe to end up in Flint, Michigan when you don't know how to get home. And so there were some safety concerns, and I felt like we had two options at this point. Option number one is to find a companion and interview someone that is your age, that you like to joke around with, that you can have fun with, that can go shopping with you, and whenever you want to go do something, it's a companion that can do that. Or two, we have to fix your brain, because at this point, it's, we've been working together. You're probably 12 years after your injury. And if your functional memory and your brain doesn't get better, then we only can go with option one, as much as we want to fix your brain. And so I just basically said, instead of working on exposure therapy and compensatory strategies for all of these life goals, we were going to take a pause and we were going to do all sports summer. And I was going to work on goals related to getting your left and your right brain working together, getting your frontal lobe and your occipital lobe and your parietal lobe and your temporal lobe all working together so that we could see just what your brain can do.
And I thought we were just doing the sport. I didn't know he was looking at all those other things.
That's why I love sports. There's so much
I know.
you get out of it.
Yes, and I get that now.
Tell me about that though, because you couldn't run, right? At this point in time.
No, I couldn't run, but I love basketball. And so Meg, the genius that she is, gave me a basketball, and I could walk and dribble at the same time, which got me back into walking.
Isn't that crazy? So what made you think of this, and why do you think that this worked? I love the concept of all sports summer. This is just being a sports guy myself. I just love the concept of this, and I'd love for you to tell me.
Well, it really got me, what got me along this path is I would have her try and touch her left hand to her right knee, crossing midline, and then her right hand to her left knee, crossing midline, and she really struggled with that. If I told her to jump over a line, she would get her body in such a strange position, and she had no ups. For a basketballer, she had no ups. She could not jump. Even sitting on a ball, if you told her to bounce on the ball, she couldn't get the rhythm and timing to actually make the ball bounce to a pattern. So she had a lot of motor planning problems. And so I thought, interesting, you have all these motor planning problems, which we have to work on because motor planning is essential. But it was, if I told her to swing a racket, if I told her to do that type of a racket movement with her arm, she couldn't do it. But if I gave her a racket and threw a ball at her, she could swing it and hit it. And so, your old motor pathways and the sports was stored in a different part of her brain, that it was more automatic and different than the premotor cortex, where her new learning and planned movements were. And so in my head, I thought, you know what, let's try working on some reflexive movement. And so I gave her a basketball and she could start to dribble. And then it's like, well, let's see if you can take a few steps running. And when I first met her, she had something called an AFO on, which is an ankle foot orthosis, that kept her foot in a kind of a locked position so she didn't drag her toes because her foot would drop. And by the end of all sports summer, she didn't need her AFO. She was moving better. She was more coordinated, and she was starting to get physically better. Not only that, we also did whole brain exercises that were, I think, pretty brutal. She was so tired from there, where we'd sit on a ball, like one of those big Swiss balls, and she would have to bounce. And then while she's bouncing, and actually I would have to bounce her, because to get her to do rhythm and timing, I had to be behind her to get her to try and bounce. And then eventually we'd move to crossing midline, left leg, right knee or right ankle, and go back and forth. And while she's doing that, I'd have her do some visual tracking, maybe Paul Dennison's Lazy 8 movements or some brain gym exercise. I'd have her add the visual tracking. So she's got left and right side working. She's got upper and lower body working. She's got both hemispheres working. If we were bouncing, she had the temporal lobe and the occipital lobe working. If we were visual tracking, she had her occipital lobe working. And then I would add, okay, every time your left hand touches your right knee, we're going to name a color, or repeat after me something. And now we have your frontal lobe working. So we would do these whole brain exercises to try and get as much of her brain working together simultaneously as possible, because let's face it, real world requires that. You have to push a cart and think about what's on your list and who's in front of you and visually track. And so those were the missing pieces, and that made a huge difference.
So huge. So I got to fast forward a little bit here in the sense of, you went through us. Oh, actually, I got to rewind back a little bit, because you were talking about the vertigo and how you couldn't move your neck. And I want you to tell me about after you did the therapy and you drove home for the first time. What was that like?
Like I could see, I could move my head. I could see deer out in the field. And it was amazing. It's like my whole world got bigger, because before it was just this.
Yeah. You're only being able to see in one position,
Yeah.
and now you're seeing the deer.
Now I can see the deer, and I can see cars coming. Yeah.
That's why it was scary before.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit. I want to talk about the visit that you had. It was like the end of your therapy, right? And can you tell me about what happened when you came in and sat down with Meg, and she was telling you this is kind of the end, and you had kind of a special transition?
Oh, yeah. So I went in to see Meg, and I was showing her how I had cooked for myself, and I had done all these other things, and she looked me square in the eyes and asked me if I wanted to work there. And that was the biggest surprise. I never thought I would work again, number one. I never thought I would earn my own paycheck, which I did. And I mean, it took me a while to even get back into being able to work and have that stamina, but I did it. And I remember when I got that first paycheck, it's like I can conquer the world now. So
how empowering is that?
It was unreal.
Yeah, I had talked to Dr. Perlman ahead of time, and I said, I'd really like to write my last OT note for Shirley and build the insurance company for the last time, because I think that the goals that she needs to work on, which are like answering the phone, roundabouts, like some of the high level problem solving she can work on while working at Galaxy. And he was like, okay, try not to make it too official just in case, but like go ahead. And it was I was just so happy to say, Shirley, I think I wrote my last OT note for you. And it was.
What'd you think when she said that? What'd you think was going to happen? Were you kind of scared?
I thought we were done.
Yeah.
It's like, now what am I going to do? It's like I knew I wasn't finished, but I didn't know I was ready for a job either. So it was amazing. It was just an amazing moment, and it took me a while to even let it sink in. And when it did, I felt like I could conquer the world. I really did.
And I will say that to any therapist out there that thinks you can just discharge someone, shame on you, because every time you discharge someone, you should be replacing it with something meaningful. And if you haven't been the therapist that made sure something meaningful is lined up to replace formal therapies, then you haven't done your job. Whether it's volunteering in the community, which you did that too before. We didn't even get into that. There's so many stories we could tell and not enough time to tell them. But as a therapist, make sure that you are helping people transition into something more meaningful than the therapy you're providing.
So powerful. So
that's one of the things I want to do with Meg and the therapists at Galaxy is like have a cookout and have all the people come back that know the therapist and just want to talk about their progress, because it feels good to talk about your progress when you started from nothing. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's really, really important.
Oh, so huge. So tell me about your role at Galaxy.
Well, right now I check everybody in. I get to share my story if I want to, and most of the time I do want to, and let them know that if you want it bad enough, you have to do it every single day, not just on days of therapy. And I think one of the things is letting them know that I've come a long ways, but I'm still not perfect. But then knowing I wasn't perfect before I had the head injury. So we get to laugh. I get to laugh at them. I make them feel human because that's how I wanted to feel. I didn't want to feel like that's a lady with a head injury. And so we have a special bond. And I even had one guy ask me to sit down and tell my story to him, and then he can tell me his story. So
that's powerful.
It is, and it's like my heart is so in it. I care about every person that comes through that door.
How powerful do you think that is for somebody that was in your shoes, that had a brain injury, to come in and right away being able to relate with somebody that's been in their shoes or is still in their shoes?
I can see the relief on their face. It's like, I'm not the only one. Mm-hmm. Because at the time you think you are the only one, because everybody else is doing what comes natural, and we had to learn it or relearn it and keep learning it. So I do. I love the clients, and they respect me, and I respect them. And like Meg said, laughter is the best therapy ever. And so if somebody comes in and they're all confused, they don't know where they are, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, I will break that train of thought and have them sing a song. So I know that that's what worked for me. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I will say, too, that I think some of the biggest feedback we get at Galaxy, because we've been treating brain injury for over 20 years, and it's been our focus. So we're not a clinic that tries to do everything. We do work in all areas of neuro rehab. We can see pediatrics and adults and aphasia and anything to do with neuro rehab. But I think because we've been so focused on helping these high-level TBIs, Shirley was, I'm going to say, lower level. But since then, we see people who have been discharged other places because that therapist was out of tools from their toolbox. And I think one thing that we can do is challenge people that have a high IQ, want to get back into teaching or into medicine or into whatever high profile, high functioning job they need to get back into. And we can help challenge them in ways that other places can't. But I wanted to piggyback off of what you said, because I think it's so important for people to feel like they don't have to explain a brain injury. They don't have to explain their symptoms. When I was doing evaluations, people would say, "Oh my gosh, how did you know to ask that question?
Yeah.
How did you, why?" I mean, we have questions on our eval that you're not going to see on other people's vals. How did you know that I would be struggling with this? And it's because for so many years, I had to put myself in Shirley's brain.
Oh.
I could tell you every restaurant in Ann Arbor that has a really loud phone ringing, or that's kitchen is clanky, or that's lights are buzzy, or that has like what hours of the day to go into the coffee shop and when not to, because I had to put myself from a sensory perspective into her body and try and feel everything she felt so that I could anticipate her needs and we could work through that. And I think there's very few places that really get it, and where you don't have to spend the first three, sessions explaining yourself. And and I think when I really realized that is when someone came off the elevator and they just closed their eyes and they had a big sigh and they're like, "I'm safe, finally safe." And I was just like, that wasn't my therapist. I wasn't their therapist, but I observed that and thought, oh my goodness, thank God there's a place like Galaxy that people feel safe, and that we can build that trust, and they can be pushed in areas because they feel like there's a really good safety net to catch them.
And some of the people too that have talked to me, just low key, they use the same phrase. They get me.
Mm.
Yep. Most of the time, your family doesn't get you.
Absolutely.
So they depend on Galaxy to get them and to get them through and to understand and to go slow and to go faster and sit down and have a cup of coffee with them. I mean, we are a family safe.
Yeah, we're a family.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things we talked about when we first sat down, is how it's a family and it's a culture, and you want to bring people into that family of living their best life. But one thing I want to bring up, we talked about how your purpose kind of became your purpose, right? And it just kind of formed and happened around you. And I think we talked about this a few weeks ago when we sat down, about how you were a teacher and a mentor and always making a difference in people's life. And sometimes we look at something that happens like this accident, and for so long you struggled in this hopelessness. But coming back full circle, we're meant to go through certain challenges in life in order to arrive at our full purpose. And how beautiful is it that you're now in this full circle living your purpose?
I can't even put it into words. I am totally living my best life. I really am. I thought I was good at the training school when I worked with juvenile delinquents, but I'm better than that now, because I feel things. I get people. I accept people the way they are. So my heart and soul is in Galaxy.
It's beautiful, because we dove into this a few weeks ago, and you told me, why did you start working in the juvenile school in the first place?
Because I was kind of a delinquent myself. So again, I could relate to them.
Right.
And I just want to say too, how hard it was to think about telling your story. We've talked about telling your story for almost 20 years. And I will mention that we met about 20 years ago.
Wow.
So the journey is not a quick fix.
Right.
It's a process, and she's been working for Galaxy for over 4 years. But when you think about the time it took to get to that place, you have to give yourself grace, and you have to give yourself time, and you have to just get better day after day. But I do have to commend you, because part of your willingness to tell your story is because this is part of you giving back.
Yes.
I want everybody to hear it. And if I do it this way or individually, because that really was a dark place, and I didn't want to go back to it to tell the story. And some of it I had forgotten.
Mm-hmm. I know how painful it was that first time that you listened to that clip that I caught.
Yes. Yes. And when I figure out and actually feel all the people that helped me get here, like you said, it's a village.
What would you say to somebody that was in your shoes all those years ago, feeling hopelessness, feeling like there's nobody out there and that you're not going to get better?
I think the main thing is you have to do it every day. It's not a Monday, Wednesday fix at therapy. You have to do it every day. You have to have a purpose. You have to have a goal.
You have to have a person.
Yeah.
You have to find someone that gets you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to do it by yourself.
Yep. Yeah.
And I do think we have to talk a little bit about Dr. Hansen.
Yes, this was okay. So again, as I'm reading through your notes, I'm reading through this, and I didn't think I could cry anymore. But I hit this part, and so I really want to talk about this as well. Coming full circle, in how much did Dr. Hansen help you?
She helped me so much because she was definitely the professional. You know, we would talk about things, and I knew it was all confidential. We laughed in our own way, but she told me if she saw me on the street that she couldn't say hi to me because of confidentiality unless I spoke to her first.
Uh-huh.
And with Meg, it's, hey, Meg.
We just pretend that we're related. She was a light to you. She was a lifeline. She was a light. She was always checking in with you. She was bringing you lean cuisines.
Yep.
Because you needed them. You were too proud to say, I don't need them, but you really did. Because you wouldn't cook for yourself. She would go out of her way. I don't know how many therapists bring their clients a frozen meal every single session, but that was Jan. Jan ended up declining pretty severely, and her husband asked if we would come and visit, and we wanted to come visit. We were one of many people that wanted to come visit. So we came and visited on a Tuesday. And we had the most amazing visit. We laughed so hard. We laughed about all kinds of things. We laughed about pictures of her in go-go boots, like a serious person you cannot believe was wearing go-go boots at one point in time. But we were laughing about just all the things we had been through together as a team, because it really was a team approach. And it was so great that her husband asked us to come back again. And he said, I have not seen her light up like this in so long. Can you come back on Thursday? And so we came back on Thursday. And Shirley, do you want to tell this part?
Well, we had you could tell Jan was getting tired. And so we decided it was time to go. So I looked at Jan. I go, Jan, I've got to go or I'm going to be late for work. And she gave me the thumbs up, so I know that she heard me. And that was the last time I saw her.
It was such a celebration, though, because we actually had prayed together over Jan, and that was the prayer that he posted, and that was on the back of her funeral.
Yep.
Was the prayer that we prayed.
Yes.
And then she just, she wasn't talking that day and she wasn't moving much, but she took her blanket off and she just pumped her fist, and she couldn't say, but you could tell it was like, we did it, that we did it.
We did it.
And she was so proud of you. And you were just like, Jan, I'm going to be late to work if we don't leave. And we were crying. Jason, you're crying.
Yeah, I know,
it was such just again, that full circle. You look at the tapestry, you zoom in on Jan, and then you zoom back out and you see how we all help each other. And that's what life's about. You help the person in front of you. And sometimes you're the person getting helped, and sometimes you're helping that person. But it's beautiful. It's like, it's hard to believe that this is our story and that it didn't end here, because we have people coming in the door all the time. We had someone come in the door that said, I've been at Michigan, I've been at Mary Free Bed, I've been all these places the last 7 months, and I cannot believe the difference in what's happening here, and just going on and on about it. So we're still doing it.
Yeah.
We're still doing it.
I want to talk because we've talked about all the outside of the box ways that you and Shirley work together, and I think this is a really cool way because you talked about earlier how she loves sports. U of M fan, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So, but you couldn't go to games anymore, and you both told me this incredible story of what you did to prepare Shirley to go back and attend a U of M game. Can you two share that story with me?
Well, you talk about the preparation.
Okay. So Shirley loves, and I mean loves Michigan and loves Michigan football. You should see. I mean,
When was the only time that you wore a Michigan State shirt, or you said go green, right? Was with Jan?
With Jan.
Yep.
At Jan's funeral,
Yeah.
you wore a Michigan State shirt.
I did.
Now, I have a daughter that goes to state, so I now am,
You have to support.
I am a house divided. I'm a heart divided. But she loved Michigan football. And so part of going to a game when you have high anxiety, when crowds are difficult for you, when thinking and walking and talking, kind of putting it all together is hard and processing it all, we had to do it in baby steps. So the first thing was for me to find a ticket that was near the aisle towards the top, not down too many steps. And back in the day, we could go on a Tuesday and the stadium was open. And so we knew what our seats were going to be. And we'd go in the stadium and we'd just sit there and we'd talk about what the game would be like. And we'd find the bathrooms, and the stadium was empty. And we did that, I don't know, handful of times.
Yep.
And then we snuck down and
Visualization what the crowd would be
yeah,
like.
what it would be like.
Yep.
And we walked down on the field.
I got to walk on the brand new artificial turf.
Oh, how amazing was that?
I know.
I don't know if we were supposed to,
I
but
don't think we were supposed to.
we're not very good at following rules, apparently.
I can tell. You're my kind of people.
Yes. So then we would go on days that we didn't have tickets. So we would park like everyone parked, and we'd find where we're going to park. And we would go and walk through the crowds and the tailgaters on game days and kind of walk all the way up to the gate. And then when they get in, we'd turn around and walk all the way back. But just practicing being in the crowd, practicing being a part of it, processing it. Like, does that energy make you feel good? Does it make you feel anxious? And so we did that a couple times so that by the time the game day came and we actually had tickets and we could go in, it was amazing.
It was totally amazing. And I had on my Michigan clothes. I wore Michigan flip-flops. And I can't keep flip-flops on. And so I had blisters on my toes from wearing flip-flops, but it was better to look good to feel good. Yeah, it was an amazing day. Amazing.
How long did you prep beforehand, before game day?
I mean, we probably had 10 or more therapy sessions around that. And if you think about all the times we walked on the diag or around crowds, so it wasn't just that. It was walking around people. It was walking through Target and being able to be in an aisle with someone and pass without having panic. Because there was a time where if we were in Target and someone came down the aisle, Shirley would have to turn and face the aisle and kind of put horse blinders on.
Yeah.
And tune out the people. And then once they finally were out of the aisle, she could, okay, now I can keep walking. So it was going from, I mean, if you think about that, it was maybe 100 or more sessions working on being around people, working on pedestrian crowds, working on walking on a sidewalk. That was a big thing. Walking from a park. We started walking over a bridge. Do you remember?
Yes. There was a bridge. It had a stream under it, and Meg wanted me to walk across that bridge. But all I could hear was the water moving until I had to tell Meg I was sick. I couldn't do it. So that was it for that session. But then we did it over and over and over again until I did it.
And you look at that, and I think this is a recipe for success for anything in life is that preparation. Whether you're getting over a brain injury or you're studying, becoming a doctor or something, an entrepreneur, anything that you're doing in life, practicing a sport, it's putting that preparation time into it and preparing for it. But you look at that progress from being in Target and somebody walking by you in having that anxiety to how many people are in Michigan Stadium at this point when you go to the game?
Yeah. What? 109,000?
How was it? Was it everything that when you got there, was it everything that you had visualized through the preparation?
I think I was so high on the game that I blocked some of it out.
Uh-huh.
I was just so glad to be there.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Did they win?
I think they did.
I think they did
I think
too.
they did. I still have the ticket, actually.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we left right before the game was over.
Yeah.
To
get
beat the
out
crowd,
and-
because
yeah.
by the time we were there, it was time to go.
Yeah.
We didn't stay the whole game, but we stayed almost the whole game.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I think that is the other key piece is you just have to enjoy the ride. It's not about the end product. You really have to enjoy getting there and have self-compassion. You have to give yourself compassion and be proud of the steps that you make, whether they're big or small. Just keep going.
That's so true. Because we call it a journey. And when you think of it that way, that's kind of soothing. It's just a journey. You'll get there. But the funny part is you never want to end that journey. So I'm still learning. I'm still getting better. And I'm still making a difference. And I have come to like and love who I am now.
And I still don't have all the answers. I don't have any of them. You have to figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the answers. You just have to have the desire to figure it out.
Well, and that even goes for today's podcast, right? In the preparation, and I know you had your notes at the beginning, right? And you've done just great without your notes. Now, let me ask you this. How is it? We're now an hour, we're 62 minutes through the podcast. Are you excited or are you nervous?
Well, I think you said to use the word excited. So I'll go with that.
Was it as painful as you thought it was
No.
going to be? No.
No, not at all.
It's just sitting down and talking, right?
Yep.
We had this conversation a few weeks back, and we talked about the power of a story and how somebody else's story has the power to change somebody's life. With people out there listening right now, what do you hope happens by them hearing your story?
Well, it's like we've talked about. It's the baby steps that get the giant steps. And so you have to go through it that way. It's not going to, you do it once, it's not going to fix it. You do it 100 times, it's not going to fix it. And it's just like me. I still have to adjust, what is hard for me. I can do it, but I have to do it the way it works for me. Mm-hmm. And so there may not always be an answer. You have to figure it out.
How do you embrace that change?
Well, first I go through the steps of being anxious and afraid, and I don't want to do this. And then you realize it's just a moment. It's just a moment in time, and you give it your best, and eventually you continue your journey.
And now you're writing your story, right? And you get to tell your story to people.
Yes.
And it's inspiration and hope for them. You're in turn, again, empowering people.
There's so much more to the story that we didn't get to.
Yeah.
But I feel more comfortable talking about my story because for all these years up until now, I never talked about it. Because there's shame, there's embarrassment. You don't want it to be real. And so you just survive.
I know, and to finish it up, after we had that first conversation and I was sending out the clips, and there was anxiety about, because I was releasing the clips from the beginning, and it was taking you back to the times you didn't want to remember, and you see yourself as you should, the strong person that overcame all of that. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, and I know I've overcame a ton of crazy stuff in my life, and that is the stuff that I'm here today because of those reasons. And so to be able to tell that you're a source of strength and hope for so many other people, and now you've metamorphosed, you've transformed to this spot to be able to tell your story, and think how powerful that's going to be for people.
I love it. I totally love it because in going through that journey, I learned my purpose. I really think that helping other people with brain injury, even if it's a stroke, it's still a brain injury, so I can still help them. I can still have compassion for them. So, yeah.
Meg, for the people out there listening, People out there like Shirley that are going through challenges, what would you say to them?
I would say, number one, things can get better, and that your brain is a powerful tool. And that if you don't challenge it, it's so smart, it's going to stay where it's at.
Absolutely.
Why use energy that you don't have to use? It's not going to learn how to do things if you don't force it there. It's just going to stay efficient. Why use energy for something she's not going to do anymore?
If you don't use it, you
if
lose
you don't
it, right?
use it, right? So I would say the things that you want to do, let's start challenging your brain to do them. And then find someone. I know that while Galaxy is trying to get everywhere, I know that you might not have a Galaxy around the corner. So you could call Galaxy, we could do virtual therapy, but you also could find someone in your close, immediate family that gets you, that knows you. In order to get you, you have to be raw with them. You can't mask your deficits. You have to find someone you can trust, whether it's a therapist or a friend. You have to let down your guard and let them know what's really going on the inside, because it's really important for someone to be there for you and help anticipate needs and help you get that just right challenge for them to understand. And, preferably a therapist, but I get that not everyone has access to therapy. Not everyone has, maybe your insurance ran out or you don't have it. So you find someone that you can trust that can be that person that helps you try things you haven't done before. And the power of whole brain exercise. I mean, we could go a whole podcast on whole brain exercise.
Absolutely.
And challenging the right and left hemisphere. But I would say your brain's amazing. You are amazing. The world needs you, and the world needs your story. And you can be like Shirley, and you can overcome, and you can inspire people.
So awesome. So awesome. And sometimes the solution can be easy. And if you don't tell somebody what the problem is, how can it ever be solved? And it
Right.
reminds me when you said that
I should
of
have
Shirley's neck, right? And
Yeah.
having a move.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you let on what's going on, you were able to fix it.
Right. And I will say, too, I should have said this, that the solution is not always do it the way you did it before.
Yeah.
So as a therapist, doing it the way we did it before or as close to the way we did it before is called remediation. We're doing exercises to really fix the brain. But there's also compensatory strategies. We can come up with strategies that actually make the task easier. So there are ways to do things that kind of that compromise. So I think finding someone that gets brain injury or that gets you, and don't give up on yourself.
So you mentioned teletherapy. What areas do you serve? And there are situations where people can call in or you can do virtual.
Sure. So right now we are in Southeast Michigan. We have an office out of Ann Arbor. We also have a small office we are opening in Howell. We can service teletherapy all over the state of Michigan, but we are actually certifying therapists in other states. So if you are outside of Michigan and you want therapy services, we can go through the process to make sure that we have a therapist certified in your state to be able to treat. We are actually expanding into mental health therapy. We have our counselor started today, actually.
Awesome.
Shout out to Megan. And we have a retired neuropsychologist that also does mindfulness practice with us. And so really expanding in creating community, because I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about, but Galaxy is a community. It's a family. It's a community, because brain injury is isolating. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to create community programs and honestly be a part of affordable healthcare, because we have to come up with affordable ways for people to get services that may not have an insurance company backing them. And that is a really strong mission for us, is to be a affordable healthcare solution for people who might have to private pay.
How do people take that next step to finding out if Galaxy is the right fit for them?
There is on our website, www.galaxybraincenter.com, there is a box that you can click that says, I believe it says, connect me with a therapist or register as a client.
Meg, Shirley, thank you so much. I can't emphasize enough how how much of an honor and a pleasure or privilege it is for me to be able to be the one to help you tell your story and get it out there. So thank you so much for being your first podcast ever. That's so super amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's such a privilege to sit here with you, Jason, and with you, Shirley. And I am so proud of you. I'm so impressed and so proud, and just I feel really blessed to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
My pleasure.